So, what's the real link between the money we use every day and the freedom we actually have? Well, today we're going to dive right into that. We're going to explore how a long history of state-controlled money has sparked a search for alternatives, and how that search has led to brand new technologies, like a project called BTCD.
Let's just kick things off with a question that really frames everything we're about to talk about. Who really controls the money in your pocket? I know, it sounds simple, right? But the answer has these massive implications for pretty much every part of our lives, from what we can buy to even what we can say. Here's the game plan for today. First, we're going to unpack that deep philosophical connection between money and freedom. Then we'll get into the historical hiccups with state-run cash. That whole story sets the stage for what some call a technological escape route, a path that starts with theory, leads to Bitcoin, and then brings us to new projects like BTCD.
All right, let's jump right in. Section 1. How are money, power, and freedom all tangled up with each other?
So, here's the central idea, the absolute core of the argument. The power to create and control money isn't just about spreadsheets and economics, no. It's a lever for social control. The thinking goes that when one single entity, say a government, has a complete monopoly on money, it gets this huge influence over our personal choices and, ultimately, our freedom.
Okay, so if that's the theory, what are the real-world effects? Well, that leads us straight to the problems that, according to this view, come from a state's monopoly on money, or, as our source calls it, the chains of state currency.
This quote from the economist Friedrich Hayek really gets to the heart of it. His argument, in a nutshell, is that all throughout history, whenever governments get total control over money, they usually end up misusing that power. And that misuse, he claims, doesn't just cause economic problems, it distorts the entire fabric of society.
And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. The argument points to what it sees as a very clear historical pattern. You've got ancient Rome watering down the value of its coins, the painful stagflation of the 1970s, and even the 2008 financial crisis. Each one of these is held up as an example of state monetary policy going wrong and wiping out the savings of ordinary people.
So, if state-controlled currency is presented as the problem, what's the solution? The philosophy we're digging into points to one fundamental concept as the bedrock of liberty, and that's the right to private property.
And here, the thinker Ludwig von Mises makes this incredibly direct connection. For him, freedom isn't some fuzzy, abstract idea. It's physically encapsulated in your right to own things. It's less about being wealthy and a whole lot more about being in control of your own destiny.
This slide just lays it out so clearly. The argument is, when the means of production, factories, land, tools, all that stuff, are owned by lots of different people, power is naturally spread out. It creates a kind of buffer against total state control. But when property rights are weak and ownership gets centralized, individuals become dependent on that central authority, and they lose their power to make independent choices.
Okay, so that's the philosophy, but for decades, that's all it was, just philosophy. I mean, how could you even begin to challenge a state's monopoly on money? Well, that brings us to Section 4. A technological escape route.
You can almost see this timeline as an idea just waiting for technology to catch up. It kicks off in 1984, with Hayek dreaming about finding some sly, roundabout way to create private money. Fast forward to 1999, Milton Friedman is predicting secure electronic cash, and then bam, 2009 happens. Bitcoin arrives and turns decades of pure theory into a living, breathing reality.
And this was the real breakthrough. Bitcoin's genius wasn't just about creating digital money, it was about creating permissionless money. For the very first time in history, you could hold and send value to anyone, anywhere in the world, without having to ask a bank or a government for permission. The control was 100% yours.
But Bitcoin had a big problem for everyday use. Its price was just all over the place, totally volatile. And that's where the next evolution comes in, with projects like BTCD that are trying to create a new way of doing things.
So first off, what even is a decentralized stablecoin? Well, unlike some other stablecoins that are backed by actual dollars sitting in a bank somewhere, a decentralized one tries to stay stable without having a central point of failure. The goal is to be both stable and trustless.
Okay, so how does BTCD actually do it? Well, you can think of it as a four-part system that's designed to be both stable and useful. First, it anchors its value to Bitcoin, kind of borrowing its security and established reputation. Second, it uses something called the BL2 protocol. Think of it like an express lane on a highway to make transactions super fast and cheap, enough for buying a coffee. Third, it builds a bridge to the real world by connecting to things like bank cards so you can actually spend it. And finally, the whole thing is built on a decentralized web infrastructure, the Elastos Smart Web, to make sure no single company can just shut it down or mess with your data.
So that's the tech. But as we all know, great technology is no guarantee of success. What does the road ahead really look like? That brings us to our final section, the unwritten future. Yeah, the road ahead is definitely filled with both major hurdles and massive opportunities. On one side, you've got serious technical challenges like getting these systems to work at a global scale, plus the giant question mark of regulation. But on the other side, you have a growing public demand for privacy and for financial alternatives, especially when the global economy feels a little shaky.
Ultimately, the whole argument circles right back to Hayek's philosophy. For this kind of technology to really succeed, it needs more than just clever code. It needs what Hayek called an extended order. Basically, a society that's built on the rule of law and a deep respect for private property. The argument is that only in that kind of environment can this type of innovation truly thrive. And so, all of this leaves us with one last, really powerful question. It's the core tension of this entire subject. We've seen the philosophical arguments, we've seen the incredible technology, but can a line of code, by itself, actually forge a new path to human freedom? That's definitely something to think about.